Hello, everyone. It is August 20th at 6:08 p.m. We are having our August 2020 guest speaker for Ideas Student Society. We are pleased to have Ph.D. candidate in the Environmental Life Sciences Department, Miranda Bernard, here to speak with us at ASU. I should probably specify she's a Ph.D. candidate at Arizona State University, and she has agreed to come speak with us about her journey to PhD, her experience within the program, as well as a little bit about the field itself. So I will pass this over to her. Oh, real quick, thank you to Itziel for reaching out to Miranda and asking her to come speak with us. Really appreciate the opportunity to bring this field to our members to see who might be interested, if this will be the science for them, so to speak. So Miranda, I will pass it over to you. I made you a co-host, so you should be able to screen share.
Well, thank you, Ellie, and thank you guys for having me. I've never really done anything like this before. It'll probably be pretty casual. Definitely, if you have any questions, either just ask them during it, if it's relevant or not to what I'm talking about, or put them in the chat. I have a PowerPoint, but it's mainly just pictures to kind of help me remember what I wanted to say, and mainly just pictures. So let me figure out how to share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
And then I just need to present. Okay, can you see the full? Okay. Yeah, so as Ellie said, my name is Miranda. I'm a PhD candidate in environmental life sciences at ASU. I'm originally from Maryland. I did my undergraduate degree in New Jersey at Princeton. I actually majored in civil and environmental engineering. So if you have concerns about going into a field that's different than you're majoring in, like, feel free to ask questions. I basically have always loved the environment in different aspects of conservation. Like I remember doing like my 5th or 6th grade science fair project on global warming and sea level rise. And it's just something I've always been interested in, and consuming less resources. But I was always really good at math and science. And so when I started my undergraduate degree, I decided to major in engineering. And it was really hard, and I struggled at most of my classes, but I had a lot of really fun experiences throughout the summer, and I think you guys will see a theme in those. So one of the first things I did was there we go. I got an opportunity to take courses at Duke University's Marine Lab. I got some scholarship that paid for the credits. It paid for housing, paid for food, paid for my flight there. It was a great opportunity. Wasn't getting paid, but I was getting all of these benefits. And I ended up taking 2 courses there. One was on policy, and then one was on the biology of sea turtles. And so that was really my first biology type course for that I took in undergrad. And so I don't know if many of you know this, but Duke's Marine Lab is in North Carolina, on what's known as the Barrier Islands. So it's a really interesting place to study marine systems and the impacts of natural disasters and climates, because these barrier islands are intended, they're supposed to shift over time, and they're not supposed to be these stationary places. But you'll see in this picture, something that's common is a house that was maybe once right on the water is now more inland, and the reverse is true. A lot of houses that were inland are now really close to the water, and that's a big problem because it can soon be taken up by the ocean. So it's an area where I really started to see how climate and climate change were impacting people on this like very specific level. We learned a lot about sea turtles, which I love and have been passionate about like throughout my childhood and undergrad. I think similar to a lot of people who end up going into marine sciences, there's just one study species that they just become really interested in, and that kind of motivates them through. But we learned a lot about threats to sea turtles. These pictures are not mine. Partly I did have a sea turtle picture, but we were doing like a dissection on it, and it was pretty gross looking, so I didn't want to show you guys that. But that was a really cool experience because I got to take these really cool courses for free. And then I went back to school, continued my entry engineering courses, which I'm not sure how it is at ASU, but for my program, you start engineering by taking physics, chemistry, and math courses, and you're really just in these very specific intro level courses, and you're not actually learning engineering for a while. I see a question. Have you had the opportunity to visit any of the sea turtle rehab centers in that area of North Carolina? I actually was able to visit one. We went to I think it was called the Karen Beasley rehab center, and it was really cool. The types of sea turtles they have there are mostly sea turtles that are hit by boats. So they'll usually have scars, or maybe were caught up in a fishing net and missing a fin. So they really try to get the sea turtles back into a shape where they can have a good chance of survival back in the wild. So I'm not sure if you've ever been, Nikki, but they are really cool, the work they're doing there. Oh, cool. Yeah, Nikki said that's the one. Yeah, they often have interns there like all the time. They usually put up, they help you out with housing, I think. So if you are interested in something like that, a rehab center is like a great place to start to get to know more about sea turtles and kind of their threats and how to mitigate these threats. So then the next summer, I actually did what's called an REU, and it's a program through the National Science Foundation. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but the National Science Foundation is basically a branch. This may not be the right terminology, but it's part of the federal government that gives a lot of funding towards sciences. And so a lot of professors in the sciences apply for NSF grants. You can get NSF graduate fellowships. But another thing they do is research experience for undergraduates. And those are run by professors who propose projects that undergrads can do. And there's a lot of variation within the types of research you'll be doing. Sometimes it's just one student at an institution. In my case, there were 8 of us, and we were from all over. We were mostly sophomores and juniors in college. You can do them multiple times, which I actually didn't realize until recently. I honestly wish I had done an RU again, just because it was such a great experience. They're funded, so mine, I got a summer stipend and they took care of our housing. So it's really a great opportunity if you're interested in getting research experience and you can't afford to do a volunteer opportunity. And you get to know professors really well. So the professors I worked with helped me with my grad school applications. I was able to go to a conference for this research. But what we did was we went to the Bahamas for a few weeks. You can see us on this little platform we're in a blue hole, which is basically kind of a lake that's connected somehow through some form of a conduit to the ocean. So the sediments in these blue holes provide a really cool record of the past. So we can see in the center here, that's actually me holding this core. So we basically went down into the sediment and took out a tube of the sediment from the bottom of the floor. And we did this multiple times in different parts of the water, and then on a couple of different blue holes. And then we went to Minneapolis to the university. So all of this is funded through our program. And we were able to then, these are the cores. So if you look on the floor of this picture on the right, you can see that there are like distinct layers in the sediment, which is really awesome. So we split the cores open and we did a bunch of different tests on them. So this one on the left is just one. We took samples of the core at I think it was every 10 centimeters of every core. And we characterized like what type of shells were in there, like what we were finding. We took out pieces of like super old leaves, so we could do dating on that. It was really awesome. And basically this was more of a geology anthropology, because we were able to find out a lot about how the people on this island lived and where they lived based on what we found in the core, because we found evidence of like burned wood. So we knew that they were living close to the water or doing some form of daily activities by the water, things like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really fun. I think back to that and I'm like, wow, that was awesome. So I really encourage, if you're interested in sciences, I have one friend who does biomedical engineering now. And she did an REU when she was an undergraduate, and she worked in a lab at a facility in Texas. So it's for all different sorts of fields. And again, it's paid, so it's really a good opportunity. And just for mentoring, learning out how things work in different fields, it can be a great experience. And I think you can apply for multiple in the same like summer. I think this year I saw a post that they're moving a bunch to the fall, and I think they have, I don't know, some of them have probably options for online work. I would definitely look into them.
That's very interesting, and I would wonder if there would be more incentive for those programs to find opportunities online, since they're funded with the purpose of providing research.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really great point.
Out of curiosity, how far back were you dating your samples for how deep you pulled them from?
I don't recall. It was thousands of years. So that's the scale I want to say it was 7,000 years ago that we were able to date. But I don't recall for sure. Yeah, super cool. And we did things like we characterized the plants around the blue holes. We did what's it called? Figure like bathymetry maps, where you're figuring out the depth across a section of the lake. So it was really an awesome way to learn a ton of methods in one summer. They really let us experience all of it. We then made posters while we were still in the Bahamas on our research. So I also learned group work
Yeah.
very well that summer. And again, we got to present the work at a major geology conference, also funded.
Were you able to have any like scuba diving experience for anybody that was scuba certified to go and do some research?
We did. None of us were certified, I believe. So that didn't really come up. We were in the water a lot. I will say for my position that summer, like we worked a lot. Like we definitely we took days off, but like we would often work on the weekends. I think that's just one thing where um, I'm not sure how it probably differs a lot by the type of REU you're in. Um, because for us, it was kind of like we had a lot to get done. We were just trying to get done this list. And so we did work pretty hard, but I don't know, it never seemed that bad, but we would go into the lab and like do sampling. But they definitely made sure we did fun things as well. But I think there are ones that definitely have more scuba and things like that incorporated in them for the marine ones.
So you're still in your undergrad at this point and still progressing through slides, but this is already a tremendous range of experiences that you had. That's incredible.
Yeah. And keep in mind, like at the time, I was just like, these were just the things that like I just wasn't getting internships in engineering. Like I think I applied, but I wasn't getting them. But then this really cool experience that I just applied because I think my sister sent it to me. Like I was able to get this. And it's just kind of crazy to think like it was not at the time, it was like not my top choice. I was like, okay, like I'm not doing anything else this summer. Like I'll try this. Like this came up, sounded really cool. And so really awesome. But meanwhile, during the school year, I'm still trying to figure out engineering. Which brings me to, so I think my junior year, the classes just started getting really hard and I was just not enjoying them that semester. I just didn't like them. And I saw an opportunity to study abroad. They had a joint engineering and ecology program. And for me, the amount I had to pay for my tuition on campus, my financial aid transferred to my study abroad. So it was actually the same price oh cool, you're born in Kenya. That's awesome. What part?
Nairobi, and then
Okay.
I have family in Malindi still.
Okay,
and then,
cool.
one of my best friends lives on the Masai Mara. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a super pretty area. And someone else has been in Kenya. Okay, cool. So I'm not sure.
Been everywhere. Baja,
okay.
Every time we have somebody talk about where they've traveled internationally, Baja's like, oh, I've been there, and then goes into detail. It's impressive.
I'm jealous. I'm usually like, oh, I want to go there. So if you've been in Kenya or were born in Kenya, you may know Mount Kenya, which is in the backgrounds of this picture on the right. It's like part of Mount Kenya, not the main part. But yeah, so like my financial aid transfers was the same price for me to study abroad. And I know a lot of the ones, at least the main ones I've seen for programs for study abroad have been through the school sustainability. And I know they, at least for summer, offer scholarships for their like summer programs. And so I know students who've gone and not had to pay anything. So that could be a cool experience if that's an option for you. But for me, this was like a field semester program. So we took one course at a time, which I kind of just like that style better. And I think with the A and B sessions for courses, it's a little more similar to that, where you have fewer things to focus on one time. But for me, I really like that style of learning. And what we did was there were 9 of us studying abroad, and every class, like we would have like projects that changed up every few days, and we would form groups of 3. So 3 groups of 3 just based on which project we wanted to do. And this is a cool experience and kind of can translate back to like your everyday life of like, we would learn something And then we would just kind of think up questions that we wanted to answer based on what we were learning. And so we were doing a lot of that, but it was a cool opportunity because then we would actually go try to answer these questions, and that's how we formed our group. So it's like not only thinking of questions, but then we got to do them. So you may have that type of experience if you're able to work or partner with people in your areas who are doing lab work or online remote data analysis, whatever it is. Like, just thinking up questions is like a really hard thing, and it's hard for a lot of grad students, but it also is a big focus of being like a scholar or a researcher, is like you have to come up with things that you want to answer, and then figure out like, can you answer that? So kind of when I studied abroad, I realized that engineering was not for me, and that conservation was actually a career. So like in this top one, we were looking at the impacts of fire on tree growth, because, and grass regrowth, because it's a common practice to like burn the areas, so then you have this new growth that's more nutrient rich. So we got to do cool things like that, looking at poop. We looked at like dispersal of seeds. So the area we were in had long-term exclusion sites. So they had fences built so that only animals of certain sizes could get into the areas. And that's places where they've had data collected for years. In Arizona, there's the CAP LTER. If you're in the ecology area, ASU, you may be familiar with it because they do a lot of presentations, but it's the Central Arizona Project Long-Term Ecological something with an R. But it's this network. They have a network of cities where they do this sort of work. And so if you are interested in like, especially urban, yeah, thank you, Ellie. She dropped a link to it. If you are interested in the like urban ecology, especially because they're looking at cities in this network, they have a ton of data, and it's, if you're interested, like they're a great resource, and a lot of undergrads do work with them. So it could be a great opportunity, especially like remotely, to get to work on a project. And let me know if you are interested, because I'll share my email and stuff at the end, but I could get you in contact with other grad students who actually work with that type of data. But yeah, so all of that being said, I graduated and I was applying for jobs, and I was working as an intern in Maryland at the Department of the Environment, and I kept I did this for months, even after the summer when I graduated, because I knew I wanted to go to grad school because I was interested in conservation, especially marine conservation, and I didn't know how to get there. But I knew that was what I was interested in, so I spent a lot of time researching like professors that while I was working at that job, and just programs. Like I would Google like, well, I started off Googling like best schools for like graduate degrees in marine conservation. But what I kind of found out is when you're going into, especially a PhD, I'm not sure what type of programs you guys are interested in going into, but it's in the natural sciences, you're not really applying to a school, you're more applying to, like you go to a school to work with a specific person usually, because the higher up you get in education, the more specialized you are. So you're trying to match yourself with someone who has that same like specific interest that you have. So then I started researching people. I was on like Google Scholar and was just found papers. I was like, oh, this one's interesting. And just started like recording people's names. I sent a lot of emails to people asking if they were would be willing to take on a student, and not a lot of them didn't respond. Some of them responded and were like, thanks for reaching out. I'm not looking for a student. Try this person, or try me in a year. So honestly, it was probably one of the most stressful times of my life, just because I don't like uncertainty, and I can only be an intern for so long, like legally, for the state of Maryland. So I was starting to get stressed, but I did hear back from programs, and I went to interviews, and I ended up really enjoying my visit at ASU. The things that I really liked about it was, because I was interested in marine systems, a lot of the other schools were like marine campuses. And so they were very isolated. I knew from the start that I was interested in kind of humans and conservation, and that intersection. And the kind of courses that I knew I would need and the faculty I want to interact with for like the human side just aren't as common to find on the marine campuses. And ASU really there's just so many professors because it's a big school, and the ones I met with and the other students, like I really just enjoyed my visit. I was like, okay, well, I could live in Arizona, even though it's not even by the ocean, but it sounds good. That's definitely a question I get a lot. It's like, how do you do marine research by the ocean? But I think one thing to realize is a lot of people who are doing marine research, and if they're at Scripps in San Diego, or Duke at the Marine Lab, oftentimes they're studying a system that's not the one right outside their back door. Like they do get to be by the ocean, but they're still traveling to other places or using data from other places to do their research. But my research specifically, I only have like a couple of slides on this, but it's roles, perceptions, and efficacy of community engagement in Caribbean communities and marine protected areas. So a big thing I focus on is marine protected areas, which are just set aside pieces of seascape that they have some sort of limits on what human activities can occur in them. So that's a big range. So sometimes it's just no fishing or only fishing during certain hours. And then other times it's like no fishing, no diving, like no human presence. And they're usually areas of like high ecological importance. So spawning habitats, migration pathways, things of that nature, where they do serve a very important role. They can range in size. But a lot of what is found in marine protected areas is that a lot of times they're just not meeting objectives. So they may be like ecologically the most perfect place to put them. But we have to remember that there are people who are being excluded from these sites. And there are communities surrounding them that use the marine ecosystem for its resources. And so there needs to be a lot of stakeholder engagement. But stakeholder engagement itself only selects like certain people. So a lot of times it's fishers, it's tourism operators, it's local business owners, and it's not necessarily the general community itself, who maybe don't have the strongest financial tie to the marine resource, but they still have a lot of connections. And so when you're lacking this like community engagement, that's problematic, because people may not follow the rules of the marine protected area. And then when you do have this collaboration between the people making the protected areas and the people living there, it helps with enforcement. Like you feel more ownership, and there's enforcement, among many other things. So actually for my research, what I do is a lot of interviewing. So I've talked with managers, residents, in this town, and this picture is in Trinidad and Tobago. So I look across the like insular Caribbean, so like all this chain of islands, these shapes are protected areas. So you can see some are really, really small that you can't really see what shape they are, and then some are huge. And then Trinidad and Tobago is the bottom southernmost island. And then this is just a map showing that the red represents like very highly threatened reefs. So you can see across the Caribbean, like there's a lot of areas that are of concern. And so in many ways it's understudied compared to other regions of the world. Even though marine resources, like when you think of the Caribbean, you usually think of the ocean. So that being said, so this is a picture of the town where I did some interviews. But at the same time, I hate focusing on one thing for a long time. So I have been doing a lot of side projects since I started at ASU. A lot of them started before I even knew what I was doing for my dissertation. I switched dissertation topics about 3 or 4 times. And I think part of that is like, I don't have a master's, and I think I was still new to like this whole field. Like I didn't know much about marine conservation. I didn't know what was being done, what hadn't been done. I was just there as a student because I like am interested in it. So I've gotten to be involved in a lot of other projects. This is first one is on plastic pollution. So this website down here, plasticpg.org, is a group of academic professors and students and practitioners. Let's see. So formed a group. So a nurdle is a very small pellet of plastic which serves as raw material in the manufacture of plastics. To answer that question in the chat. So plastic is really comes from oil, and that's part of the issue with why recycling plastic is kind of difficult, is because it's cheaper to create new plastic, so it's called virgin plastic, than it is to recycle plastic, because oil, like especially I think the past few months, oil prices have been pretty down. So especially now, it's a lot cheaper to just create new plastic than it is to recycle old plastic. Whereas things like aluminum, and glass are pretty valuable or recyclables. So this is one thing we've done as a group, is try to like track the history of like plastic pollution and plastic policies. So this like cool, what's it called, timeline is up on this website. But so you can see that first plastic ingestion reported was in 1957. And that's just really interesting because plastics didn't exist until the 1950s. So all the problems we're seeing now have happened in the last like few decades. Like plastic is a really big problem, but it's a really new problem. And so what our group has focused on is looking globally the impacts of different plastic interventions. So I'm sure you guys are aware of bag bans, straw bans, things like that. We have these bans, but we don't really know what the impact of them is. And we also don't know how their impacts vary regionally. So different countries have different problems based on geography, based on socioeconomic conditions, politics. There's a lot of differences and variation within the countries globally. but it kind of is a thing where once one country started doing a bag ban, for example, like that kind of took off and it's kind of been this go-to policy, but we really don't know the impacts of these policies and how they vary. So we've tracked like plastic from production through its life cycle to see how different products are like being impacted by these different types of policies. Even things like beach cleanups, ocean removal of plastics. So basically we're trying to figure out at what point in this life cycle of plastics is implementing an intervention like the most like bang for your buck, basically. Like what actually has the biggest impact on reducing the amount of plastics in like rivers and the ocean.
Do you have any insight on what that is?
So this slide should help a little bit. So this, I don't know if you guys have seen the climate reduction wedges where it shows like different scenarios to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere, and they have a graph similar to this, which is like what this is based on. But you can see the teal on the left is like plastic pollution over time. And then, oops, if we continue on this trajectory is the red. And then strong reduction scenarios, the blue, where we can actually go down. And a big thing is that it's plastic production. A lot of these interventions are, especially as you increase plastic production, which it's predicted to increase because there's more people, more goods being produced. As that increases, even those pellets, the nurdles from the last slide, like those just leak into the environment, and things like that. So it's really, if we can't stop it from the production, it's really hard to deal with this problem. But that being said, there are a lot of like individual and community things that we can do that do help. But a lot of it is at that production stage of the life cycle. Like if we can cut off plastic before it even enters the system, then that's kind of where we get the most like bang for our buck. So,
and this might be a little bit more of like an opinionated question and answer type of thing, but whatever. I'm very passionate about like climate change and stuff, and anytime I post about it, I have a few friends and family members that are less passionate who always say, oh, but it would cost too much, and it's not the US that are the big problems, you know, it's countries like India and China. And so what say you to something like that with this plastic stuff? I mean, you know, can the US make an impact alone? Because I mean, it's got to start somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like one thing is that it's a global problem. Plastic moves throughout the ecosystem, and so plastic that's being released into the ocean in one place may end up on the shores of like California, or the fish that we are consuming. Like one thing that's pretty unclear is like so like one of the bigger issues potentially is microplastic. So these are like the tiny pieces of plastic. Often when like a bigger piece of plastic breaks down in the environment, we don't really know the health impacts of animals or humans ingesting microplastics. And so if you're eating fish that's caught somewhere that's ingested microplastics, then that's also our problem. And it's kind of one of those things where like microplastics are now everywhere. Like I think they found it in the ice in the Arctic. They found it in rain and air. So it is pretty pervasive. Another thing about the people saying a lot of the plastics are being released from other countries is, well, especially a few years ago, like a lot of the waste and recyclables in the US get sent abroad. China used to be a major buyer of these recyclables, but now it's other countries in Southeast Asia. I'm sure you guys heard a few years ago, or at least some of you maybe, that like China's like banned our waste, and they were doing that because the impacts of they just didn't need it anymore for their economy, and the health impacts of processing the waste was too high, which is a very valid opinion or reality. And so it's our waste that's going to these other places, and so that's something that's hard to model in these types of models. Is that it's being released in let's say China for now, but it's being released in China, but it was originally because of US consumption. So yeah, it is a pretty, yeah.
Something, this is Itzel, by the way, I switched over from my computer to my phone, but something we also learned in the conservation and biodiversity class is that it's not that the US doesn't produce it, but the US is also in demand of it. So other countries, like third world countries, are the ones producing it for us. So then that's why everybody's like, it's not a US problem, it's somebody else's problem.
I think it's an everybody problem because we all have to live on this earth, but
Yes, it is.
I will not hop on any soapboxes.
Yeah, it's definitely hard when you're getting those things on Facebook though. Like, how do you approach it? Like, how, I don't know, you don't want to put people off or, you know, be too antagonistic, but sometimes that's what you're receiving. So I definitely commend people who engage in those discussions because they're hard. So another side project I've been involved in is on fisheries, because that was something I was really interested in when I first started at ASU as well. So this is just briefly, like, there are so many certifications out there, and what do they all mean, and are they all impactful? I don't know if any of you is different. Oh wait, there's a question. How is a microplastic different from a nurdle? So a nurdle is the thing they're usually not micro. They're usually like, you know, microplastic is like less than a few millimeters.
It's microscopic.
Hmm?
It's microscopic.
They don't necessarily have to be microscopic, but they are like very small, and can be microscopic. But the nurdles is just kind of like, it's like what is used for manufacturing. So it's like these little pellets of, like, they come in different colors. And so then when you make, I'm looking around, like my glasses are made of plastic. They will heat down those nurdles. I'm pretty sure this is how it works. They'll heat it down and then mold things from them.
Got yeah.
Yeah.
Who named it nurdle? I'm just curious.
I'm not sure. I think the more common name I've heard is pellets. I'm not sure.
I like nurdle better.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like a pool noodle. I don't know why. That's what I think of when the question was first asked of what is a nurdle. Yeah, I was doing some.
Sorry, keep going.
No, that's all I have to say about nurdles.
I was gonna go back to the seafood watch that you have up here, and I am in San Jose, so we're near the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So a lot of our grocery stores have the seafood watch rating on like the back wall of the fishery counters and stuff too, so you can see, which is cool. It's I think it's a very neat touch to try to encourage conscientious purchasing and not just, oh, that fish looks good today. I'll eat that
Mhm.
because it's in front of me, and not looking at the environmental impacts of whether that's a highly fished and not a great option for the planet.
Yeah, yeah. So Monterey Bay Aquarium, like assess it, like their focus is on assessing like fish that are commonly consumed in the US and rating them um, for how well they perform in different ecological standards. You'll also see like dolphin safe. So that's for like a specific type of fishing practice it's referring to. But these are pretty common certifications, but there's just so many of them. And it's like, is one better than the other? There's no information on that. There's just very little information from the consumer end about like how to make that decision. So that was something that interested me early on. But I've been working with another grad student, my advisor, and another professor because a lot of the criteria for certifying these the fisheries are to protect the stock of fish to make sure that you're not over harvesting, but fishing, the practice of fishing still impacts the environment even beyond just how healthy the stock is. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out like how do we assess this. So if any of you are familiar with ecosystem services, it's kind of a framing that a lot of conservationists use, that we get a lot of services from the ecosystem, and so we can put a value on that. We get provisioning services, so that's things like the fish we consume as food, um, fish oil, things like this is all like something that we're taking from the fish itself, and it's providing a service. Then there are things like cultural services, which includes things like recreation and tourism. It includes like just the significance of the fish or the ecosystem to a culture or heritage, a very broad spectrum. But so we were interested, like, how do these certifications, we looked at a selection of them, compare across these ecosystem services? Like, are these certifications actually protecting these ecosystem services? So that was a lot of like reading because we just looked through the documentation, and a lot of collaborating and being like, do you think this means that we're that it's protecting nutrient cycling? Like, is this sufficient? So that was a cool collaborative project that we're kind of now wrapping up.
Sounds like a tremendous amount of data to sift through.
Yeah, it's a fair amount, because one of them, the most like widely used certification, is the Marine Stewardship Council. So that's the one in the top left. And so that's one of the original certifying bodies for fisheries, that little check mark with the fish. And so their documentation is like a few hundred pages. And we had things that we were like very much like we were clear to look out for. So we could use like search terms, but we still had to like read through a lot of the documentation a few times. But that was fun. Fisheries are really cool. I think 15% of protein consumed by humans is from fish globally. So like fish really are an important resource for us. And then, oh, this was just a video that I liked. I'll turn my volume down, you don't need it. But this is my last slide. This is at my study site. And I like this video because it reminds me of like the intersection between like humans and the environment and culture. So these are like cocoa beans, and they're like doing a dance around them. And this actually polishes them. So it's not necessary, but it's like for an aesthetic that makes them a higher value. But on the islands I was on, so they have this structure and plantation there, but there was a hurricane quite a few decades ago that kind of disrupted a lot of their agricultural practices. And so just thinking about this like intersections in like history was always my least favorite subject as a child. But for some reason in my PhD, it's become like one of my, like the most interesting things, like learning about these things that like you often don't read about in scientific papers, but that have a very lasting impact on how we operate with our ecosystems today. There's fewer flowers because of that hurricane. It changed the industries on the island. Like people used to do this cocoa processing. They used to do more agriculture, which has now made a shift towards like marine and tourism industries instead. So I think just like, I don't know, I thought about ending on like thinking about like the history of where you're studying and why you're studying things. But that's all I had for my slides.
That was incredible.
I don't know if there are any specific questions either from my presentation or just for me in general. I'll send the link to my lab too in the chat while I'm at it.
Not a question so much as I guess kind of a comment. The turtle rehab in North Carolina, we were stationed out there before, and so we went there, and there were three turtles that couldn't be rehabilitated, and one of them had something called bubble butt, they called it, where they get like air trapped under their shell, and it causes them to like, they can't dive properly, and because of that they can't ever like go back into the ocean, and so you could like adopt one of them, you know, figuratively. You give donations and you get a picture, but I thought it was really interesting how there are something as simple, well, maybe not as simple as that, but seemingly simple like that, like, oh, they got air under their shell, now this turtle can never go back into the ocean because a boat hit it, and when that happened it got air trapped under its shell, and now it's forever stuck in this rehab place. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, because turtles like control their ascent and descents and have, you know, to do a lot with their buoyancy. So yeah, having that air in there would definitely make it harder to do that, and that's sad, but it is nice to have those places that and people who are invested in taking care of them.
So with that said, what do you want to do with your PhD? Once it's all said and done, where do you want to go next? What's next?
Yeah, so one thing, I'm not 100% sure, and I've never really been sure. I've never really wanted to go into academia, just because like, as you can tell, like I love working on a variety of things, and that's really hard to do in academia. Like you're expected to be more of a specialist, and it's less common to see people who are doing such like diverse topics. I also like doing more like what's the word, like projects where there's like an end goal, like like problem-based research, which you can find a lot more in NGOs. So that's something that's always appealed to me, is like having an issue, figuring out how to solve it, and then moving on to the next issue. I don't really, you know, care too much about publishing. Like it's good for whatever sector you're in, but I don't, it takes a lot of time and work to like publish an article. And I think that's very valuable, and that information, if you work on something, should be shared. But I'm way more interested in like solving problems rather than like contributing to like the thought or theory of an aspect of conservation. So I don't know if that's through a large NGO, a small NGO, or the government. Those are like my three main um, pathways I see myself going towards. And I think each have their pros and cons. And so I think part of it will be through like experiencing one of them and deciding whether it's for me or if it's not for me.
What is,
So,
oh,
go ahead, Ellie.
no, it's okay. I just have a list of questions to go through if we're interested, but no, please.
Okay, so Miranda, you said that you had changed your thesis while you were working on it. How many times did you change it, and is it normal to change your thesis route?
Yeah, I've changed it a few times. I'm not exactly sure, and I think it depends on how you classify like what was actually like my dissertation research. I think it's definitely common for your initial research questions to change, just because the more you know, like the more you can like be specific and like know what like the gap is. So a lot of when you're in grad school doing research, you're trying to find like where is information lacking. I'm going to find that information and then fill that gap. And so a lot of people have to tailor their projects a little bit. It's definitely not uncommon to like completely switch. This is for all fields. Normally, like you stay within like the same realm of it. Mine was like a little broader, but you know, all marine conservation issues. Um, but it's kind of it's hard to switch because you know you spend a lot of time like really researching something and learning the literature in that specific field. So it is hard to feel like, wow, I just wasted a few months. But at the same time, you don't want to keep going in something that like isn't interesting to you because that's you're going to be worse off in the long run. But yeah, so I was going to say something else, but I forgot.
I'm curious when you were looking at grad programs and both with your initial application cycle as well as when you were narrowing it down to ASU, it seems as though like your entire like career focus, you've been very interdisciplinary and wanting to kind of cross those not lines, boundaries, fields to kind of get that more of an experience. What was it about ASU that you saw that, was it just the availability of faculty that you could work with in these other areas with more of like the human side you were talking about? Was it the mentality or the teaching style at ASU? What drew you to ASU for this program?
I think part of it is like the breadth of different disciplines, and the ability to take classes and like I take classes in the School of Sustainability, in CHESC, which is Human Evolution and Social Change, so more anthropology, through School of Social Transformation, which is Justice Studies. I've taken classes like across these, and there's been like no barriers to doing so. I will say that my program, Environmental Life Sciences, is an interdisciplinary program, and so I mean, that's definitely one thing to look at when you're selecting programs. Like I have to have at least one committee member outside of the School of Life Sciences, which is what the school my program's in. And not a lot of programs, and there's no limit to that. So I only have one faculty who's actually in the School of Life Sciences. I have others, one's works for Conservation International, and so he's not a professor at the moment. So I think that's something that's like I wouldn't have joined my program if they had required me to take 10 courses within the School of Life Sciences, because I don't feel like I don't need to take hydrology. I don't need to take other specific classes, you know? So I think that leniency has been really helpful for me. So it's kind of like I'm creating my own program. So that was something that really appealed to me.
Thank you for sharing the wide variety of experiences you've had. The NSF RU was not one that I'd heard of before, so I'm excited to be able to take that back to our group at large as well, because as you touched upon too, undergraduate research is something that in general students have to work to find, but for our online program in particular, it's even more of a task to look for. So it's a unique resource, and I appreciate you sharing it here.
Yeah, and I think reaching out to like faculty as well, like some faculty just know about programs that are poorly advertised, I'd say. So like just, you know, like it's really nice that you guys have this organization ideas because you can share this information, but sometimes it's really hard to find what's out there. And so like expanding your network as much as you can like really helps.
Yeah, and that's been one of our goals here is to do that, to start our networking now before we are trying to apply places and feeling behind the ball with that. What would be something that you wish you had known sooner in the process of applying to grad schools and starting as your first year?
I think like one thing is honestly just realizing that like everything that I thought was like a big deal, like emailing these professors, talking to these professors, to them it's nothing. They're so used to it. And so not to get stressed out. They're usually like super informal. They're all really nice people who like want to see like it is their job is like mentoring and teaching students. So obviously they want and doing research, but like they want to be doing this. So I think realizing that and just being a little less stressed about it. Like one thing I always recommend students applying to work with like specific advisors is like talk to their previous students. Like that's something that people have done a lot to me, and I try to do, but you know, asking questions like about their advising styles, which also means that like you need to figure out like what type of advisor, if it's a program where you're having an advisor, like what type of advisor is good for me. So like my advisor is extremely hands off, but I really like that. She's there when I need her to be, but she is for the most part like hands off, has like gives me like pretty free reign. So that's been super helpful. Another thing I wish I had thought more about was funding. Like I just didn't understand how that worked too much. And so a lot of times an advisor may have funding for an RA position, which is a research assistantship. And so what that usually means is that you're getting paid, you're on a grant and you're getting paid to do research that is like your thesis or dissertation research. And that's how you get your funding and your tuition waivers. The other option is that you're a teaching assistant, which also it gives the same amount of funding, but you're teaching, which is I have really enjoyed. But for my research, I've had to, because it wasn't part of one of my advisor's grants, but it was what I wanted to do. I've had to like seek out my own funding, which has its own benefits, but is stressful. So I mean, it's good because it shows on like your CV or resume that you're able to get funding, but it does mean that like part of my research was dependent on if I receive funding or not to do the travel for my field work.
I personally am starting the process of applying to PhD programs this cycle. So probably at the point of getting a crash course on terminology and then trying to gain exposure to what that actually means for my next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. And there are quite a few people within Ideas that are headed to the PhD route as well. We have a pretty good split between MD route, PhD route, and then I would say other post-degree professional career positions, whether that's dental vet or just further career or teaching is another one, popular one that comes up, PA, pharmacy, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's valuable insight. I personally feel that I've benefited from speaking with people on this journey, because my perception of what it was, and like before ever like going down this route to speaking with people who are in it, it's very different. The perception of academia versus what seems to be the actual experience is different. So I really appreciate the insight, and I really appreciate your time tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the chat, or if anyone wants to unmute and ask Miranda personally? I had a list of questions, but you covered most of them just within your presentation. It was amazing. Thank you so much.
Good. Good to hear.
Do you have any questions for us?
I guess what do people want to go into on this call?
Sorry, I have a noisy baby in the background here who is playing with the dog water. Whatever. I'm applying to medical school, but I have also contemplated doing a dual program and getting a PhD as well, because I really enjoy kind of like the research side of things. Not so much on the writing all the fun report stuff, but like figuring out causes and finding solutions, kind of a little bit of kind of what you were talking about. But yeah, those are my goals.
I'm looking at applying to like interdisciplinary, like umbrella programs for neurobiology, neuroscience in general, but my own personal interest is like neurobiology, some of the like biophysics underpinnings of it. So that's what I'm looking at currently, which when you talked about the process of reaching out to PIs and labs and schools as being one of the most stressful, it just like gulped a little bit, but it's gonna take it one day at a time.
Yeah, and that's for me, just because I get so intimidated by people. You know, I there are definitely people who like love that aspect of it and like getting to talk to all these different people. And I'm slowly getting there, but yeah, to me the unknown was just stressful. And like, I mean, for the MD PhD program and for like your program, the neuro, like it's good to just like talk to people who've been through it, like even, you know, kind of like an informational interview or something, just because they may say things that's like, wow, I never even thought to ask that question, or like that's good to know, even if they're at a different institution than you're looking. It can provide a lot of insight. Okay, Baja said she's looking into PhD programs in biomedical research, immunology, or clinical and translational research. Cool. I'm not sure what that last part is, but it sounds cool. I mean, one thing to look at as well, just generally for if you're going the research route, is like for the sciences, it is, and if you're doing like, yeah, the research route in the sciences, like you should be able to find programs that you're not paying for and which are giving you stipends. So I think that's a really big thing to look out for, you know, and understanding like, are they guaranteeing funding for certain number of years? I have a friend who's just started at the University of Washington, and she's in a great ecology program there, but they only guarantee them funding for 3 years, and then they have to kind of apply for grants in those 3 years to try to get them funding for like 5 or 6 years, however long it takes them. And so knowing that from the start is super important. And you know, she decided to go there. It's a great program, but it is a stress to have to worry about like how you're going to fund it. Cool. I just read the next. Ph.D. program in proteomics. I'm not sure how to say that. As well as neurobioinformatics. But yeah, there's so many people at ASU who study these things. So just, I mean, especially grad students, like sometimes PIs can, like the principal investigators of labs can take a while to get back to you. But if you're just interested on like finding out, oh yeah, I got the pronunciation right. If you're just interested in finding out more about the field or like good programs, like good PIs, because like personality is also like a big thing. Like you're going to be in these research programs for years. Like you want to be working for and with someone who you get along with. So I mean, just asking and like reaching out to like graduate students is a great step, or undergrads who are working in their labs. But you know, just going to websites, because ASU pretty much has like someone who studies everything.
For me, I would do a master's in either biotech, as we've discussed, Miranda, but I'm also torn because I kind of want to go into conservation.
Why limit yourself? Find
I
an
know, right?
institution that will let you do courses in both, like Miranda was saying.
Make my own degree, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they found like medical purposes from many things in the sea which need to be conserved. So there's a intersection right there.
Gotta protect the blue horseshoe crabs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Miranda has added her email and Twitter into the chat, and we will link that too on all the event pages as well for anybody who is watching this recording after the fact. I don't think the recording shows the chat as well, so we'll include the links and contact information for anybody who missed it. It'll be up on our YouTube. Are there any last questions for Miranda while we have her? Okay, thank you very much for your time and your presentation and all of the photos. It was a brilliant presentation, and I just really enjoyed hearing about your journey and your education and your plans too as well moving forward.
Yes, thank you so much, Miranda.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
for
having
coming
me.
and presenting to us. And next time, the dissected sea turtle, totally okay.
Yeah, totally. Okay,
Good
just
to
like
know.
a slight disclaimer beforehand, and then, hey guys, this is what we actually did in the lab.
Yeah, and the smells were horrible.
All right, have a good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you.